I've been to some of these, and that's kind of what happens. Then I'll talk a little bit about how and why I wrote the book, and of course, you have any questions, you can ask at any time. And if I start rambling, one of you need to cut me off, because some of these things I get enthused about. And the title was Check Canopy. Obviously, that's a procedure that a paratrooper does, but it's one of the most important. You can do a lot of things, but you probably should make sure your canopy opened if you want to make sure everything's going okay. And I kind of use that as a metaphor for you got to take care of your health and other things that are important, your family. You can drift along thinking everything's fine, especially with what I had. I had kidney disease, and there's not a lot of outward signs with that. There's not a lot of pain. There's not a lot of, you know something's going wrong. So I was kind of in complete denial and didn't do much about it till it was too late. In other words, I didn't look up and see that my canopy wasn't open, and I didn't take action right away. And I'm very fortunate because I was able to get a transplant, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But not everybody is that fortunate. It's a serious disease. I go on Facebook, there's a lot of people on that, and there's some real heartbreaking things. Now, a lot of people have other complications, amputations, things like that, or weren't that healthy to begin with. So it's serious business, and frankly, it hits the African American community very hard. Tied to high blood pressure, diet. I mean, I didn't do a statistical analysis, but when I walked into the dialysis center and 8 out of 10 chairs are minorities, you can kind of see that it does hit people harder in certain demographics. So I'll just do a quick reading, and I didn't write it as an autobiography because I didn't keep a journal, something else you might want to do if you're thinking about writing. So I didn't know exact dates and times, and I did merge some things. So it is a genre. It's called biographical fiction. So on Amazon, that's what it's listed as. So I'm like number 6,000 on that thing, where you're number 400,000 or 500,000 on the regular books. But I started at 800,000. So. Okay, so I'll just do the reading. Frank was lying on a gurney in a small room, barely large enough for the gurney, the anesthesiologist, and the nurse. It was probably best that he could not see what was in store for him. Better that he did not see the doctors, technicians, and machines that awaited him on the other side of the door. The anesthesiologist opened a valve to the needle lodged in his arm and told Frank to start counting backwards from 100. He only got to 98. On March 29th, 2010, Frank was diagnosed with end-stage renal or kidney failure and was placed on dialysis. This involved being connected to a dialysis machine for 4 hours per dialysis session, 3 times per week. He continued to work at the Pentagon. His co-workers and bosses were amenable to him leaving work at 15:30, 3 days per week, to arrive at the session by 1600. This required careful planning to ensure he did not get hung up in DC traffic. Often during good weather, he would ride a motorcycle, and that gave him access to the HOV lane. Being on dialysis precluded him from traveling to conduct site visits or attend conferences for work, although that was not a huge problem since his organization was short of travel funds and emphasized use of video teleconferences. He did take one trip to Bonn, Germany for work. One of his employees told him he was too sick to travel. This was on a Sunday for a NATO conference that was to start on Tuesday. He called his boss and told her that he could attend. He rarely missed a dialysis session, but he noticed other patients routinely missed, much to the chagrin of the staff at the clinic. He decided that he could take a dialysis session on Monday morning and leave for Germany that afternoon. He would arrive in Frankfurt on Tuesday morning and take a bullet train to Bonn and get there around 10 in the morning. He would definitely miss a Wednesday session and hope to either make the Friday afternoon session or ask for a special section on Saturday. It was a great conference, but that was probably one of the dumbest things I did during this whole ordeal. Take a plane. I mean, you're not in good health. I don't think I was thinking too clearly. And then I'll just have one more short reading. Most of this novel was written while connected to a dialysis machine. On 26 July 2011, which was actually 4 days after I signed in here, he received a kidney transplant. The kidney was donated by his sister. His sister volunteered to do this and had to undergo numerous tests to ensure compatibility. These tests were done at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, and since his sister had no affiliation with the Army Surgeon General had to approve the testing. She was found to be compatible, but there was a final glitch. Walter Reed was shutting down and transferring to Bethesda Naval Hospital due to the Base Alignment and Closure Act. Both his sister and Frank were told they would have to wait until September after the transition. This could have avoided some of the tests. On July 1st, they were told there would be an opening for one last transplant. The date was locked in, the operation was performed on that date, and it was a success. He's no longer on dialysis. He wants to emphasize 2 points. You can have a decent life while on dialysis. The other thing he'd like to emphasize is the sacrifice his sister made. His sister had 2 college-age children that had participated in activities that my sister and brother-in-law attended. Their son played collegiate football, and their daughter was studying abroad in Australia. His sister and her husband were looking forward to traveling and being part of their children's final years in college by attending games and education milestones. She took a huge risk to donate the kidney, and she willingly undertook this risk. Could have jeopardized a well-deserved life of travel and adventure sport activities to include mountain climbing, skiing, and backpacking. And it speaks volumes about her character. She entered the operating room a strong, confident mother, sister, and daughter. In fact, she and her husband summited Mount Kilimanjaro in November of 2010. She had spent so much time in altitude that her red blood cell count was high and almost disqualified her. Fortunately, the doctors and nurses were used to dealing with special forces troops and soldiers who operated at altitude, to include those serving in Afghanistan, and were aware of the effects of altitude. The doctors and nurses at Walter Reed were used to seeing highly athletic people, but they were all impressed by her strength, courage, and sense of humor. So, again, I feel very fortunate that I was able to come out the other end of this with. And actually, while I was on dialysis, I continued to work, like I said, not so much because I wanted to, although I did, because I had to. I was living in Northern Virginia then, had 2 kids in college. There was really not much of a choice. But again, some people don't have that choice. In fact, most of the people that were in the clinic where I went weren't unable to work. So again, you know, it really could change everything for you. And really, I just didn't pay attention to the signs. But that'll get me to writing the book. Now, that was the front and end of the book. In the middle, the book went in a lot of different directions. First, I was going to write a story about Iraq and put all this adventure things and high-speed things, even though I didn't go there as a soldier. I figured I could write about it. I went off as a civilian. But I changed that. I was going to write about Afghanistan, changed that, and then I just thought, well, it's my first book. Let me just reflect on my career and life and write that down and see where it goes. I probably, like a lot of people, I wanted to write a book. I always wanted to. I would start, sit down, maybe have an idea or an outline, and I'd try and start with the first sentence. And that's about all I would get. And I said, oh, it's a nice day. I want to ride my motorcycle or shoot baskets or do something. And I wouldn't get any further than that. But for one, this dialysis, I was a captive audience for 4 hours. I had nothing else to do. But I wouldn't advocate that. But just devoting an hour and a half. In fact, after I came down here, I would spend some, and after I retired from Force Home, I would spend some time right here. Mr. Jackson knows that. It's quiet. And it's amazing how much you can do in an hour and a half of uninterrupted work. But I didn't start with the first sentence. I just started with maybe something I would write down somewhere along the day that would jog my memory, and then when I had time, I'd come in and just start writing. Not caring about chronology or where it would fit or why I was doing it, I just started writing. So I'll kind of go through some of that first thing I wrote about was very easy. That was being airborne. I was in an airborne unit when I was stationed here. But I went to airborne school when I was a lieutenant, like most people do. And then I came back for my first assignment 18 years later as a lieutenant colonel and, in fact, in command of the unit. That wasn't a very good idea. Although it was good for me, I enjoyed it, but every jump I did was an adventure. So that almost wrote itself. It was very easy to write. In fact, at one point I said I would jot things down. I just wrote down one word, helmet. And I started writing on my second jump. I didn't tuck my head into my chest, and the risers ripped my helmet right off my head. This is as I was going out the door. I could see the helmet in front of me flipping like this, and for a second I thought my head was in it because it hurt so bad. But you know, I looked around, there wasn't a whole lot. I found a place to land, I landed, I didn't get hurt. I stand up thinking, okay, what's going on here, what do I do now? I'm already disoriented. And up comes my commanding general in his Humvee with his driver and starts chewing me out for not having my helmet on the drop zone. And a couple years later, he's my boss at the Pentagon, and that was his favorite story to tell about the helmetless lieutenant colonel wandering around Sicily drop zone. So I just write that, just like I talked, you know, and wrote it down, tweaked it a little bit, and then moved on. Other jumps, again, they kind of wrote themselves. So I had about, that got me about 45 pages really of airborne and doing some things here. I had soldiers stationed in Haiti and went down there to visit them. And soldiers in Bosnia, we went there twice. It's just kind of routine things that you do when you're stationed here. But everything kind of, one thing I can do, I can remember details of events that happened. There was a guy here last week at an author talk. He wrote a 400-page fantasy book right out of his head. I couldn't do that. I mean, there's no way. He even did the drawings. I have to see or experience or at least get close in order to be able to write. But others can. I mean, I could never do what the Harry Potter author did, just invent something out of your head. But okay, so I did that airborne. Okay, I got 45 pages in the back. Next thing, I went, when I was in college, I went to a very small college, and I played football there. Now that sounds good, and I always kind of say that and leave it at that. But we didn't have scholarships, and if you went out for the team, you essentially were on the team. But we had a small team, and you play, so you had to be ready. It was a very enjoyable experience. I did that sort of to make friends and travel a little bit. But that also was very easy to write. We had real characters there. This was in the early 70s. We had Vietnam vets. We had a real eclectic group of people. And our team and every other team we played, again, we were very small. We had a guy that could have gone to any college in the country, and every team we played. But for some reason, I don't know, maybe he missed his girlfriend or flunked out, or he ended up, he had gone to Virginia Tech, he ended up on our team. 100 times better than everybody else. We had 3 seminarians on our team. They had already graduated from college. They were in our college seminary. I went to a Catholic school. Nobody cared if they played. We had a guy that worked in the brewery. He might have taken a class at one time or another. But I'm not sure if he ever did, really. But we had a great coach, and I actually entitled that chapter Leadership, even though you get all leadership in the military. That was real. We had a great coach. He led by example. He was a fiery guy, bad temper, really cared about people. He cared about football. He thought it was good for young men to develop. And, it just gave you a sense of the guy next to you was counting on you, a lot of things, not just the military or any kind of work, really. The people around you are counting on you, and you got to come through. It's just kind of the way it was. So again, that was about another 30 or 40 pages.